documentary feature film called African Apocalypse that's currently doing its rounds, but I'm still involved very much with television projects.
Awesome. So Ollie's going to ask us a couple of questions to get us going and get the conversation flowing. So Ollie, back to you.
Thank you, George. So thank you, everyone, Cynthia, Morgana, and David, for introducing yourselves. The first question I wanted to ask really is sort of super cliche, but I'm interested purely because often when people creatively have introduced themselves, sometimes there's a crossover in work that they've done within the industry. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came into the work that you're doing now, and if you have ever done anything else within the creative industry that lends itself to what you're doing now?
Shall I go first?
I should start with Cynthia, please.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on.
Interestingly, so I fell into agenting. Actually, it's the only job I've actually ever done. I studied law at University of Nottingham, and was very much on course to becoming a lawyer, and realised quite quickly how dull and boring my life would be if I pursued that. So stumbled across the role of agenting, which essentially marries the two worlds of, creativity and representing writers and talent, but also, deal making. So I found it as the most logical next step, the most logical thing for me to pursue, and most relevant as well, based on my degree. So ended up sort of straight out of university. In fact, before my actual my graduation ceremony, I found myself interning at Curtis Brown, and sort of fast forward 13 years later, having worked my way up the ranks from intern to assistant, now sort of fully fledged senior agent there representing. So actually my journey has been sort of very much in one place, and very much limited to agenting. My previous life was very much legal and boring.
Should we go with Morgana next? Apologies. Yeah.
No. I don't know if there's a little bit of a slowness on my internet all of a sudden. I have been all around the houses, the complete opposite to Cynthia. I started off, I think, in advertising in my early 20s, and then went back to university in my late 30s, not late 30s, sorry, late 20s. And so when I came into film and TV, I actually came via a company called Hanway Films, which is a sales agency. And then from there, I worked for two producers at Blueprint Pictures, Graham Broadbent and Peach Neen. And then I stumbled into the BFI, and during my time there, I kind of gravitated towards, actually, while I was at Blueprint Pictures, I really wanted to get more into production and understand what goes on in production. And so I ended up doing some camera training on one of their features and got a look behind the camera. And from there, I moved over into BFI and took that knowledge. And at the time that I was at BFI, there was this call down from government in regards to skills shortages that are going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years behind the camera. And I noticed that when I was on set, there was a lack of diversity and inclusion, shall we say. And so I kind of gravitated towards skills and diversity and inclusion. And then I started to notice that I had this kind of informal relationship with producers where I was suggesting talent and they were getting hired out what it was to be an agent. And she said, oh, why don't you come work for me? And then now I'm an agent, basically.
That's great. And finally, David.
I sort of fell into writing initially when I left university. So I was a print journalist for a little while, and then I got involved in radio. I did quite a lot of work at what was then Radio London, and eventually sort of found my way into the BBC. And I think I applied for I was encouraged as a result of an article, a newspaper article I'd written that some people wanted to make into a documentary. I got led into applying for a training course at the at the BBC, and next thing I knew, I was working in television, and it sort of never let me go, really.
Awesome. Ollie?
Awesome, thank you. The next question I wanted to ask, really, it's I don't know if there's an answer to this, but somebody wanted to know, what's it like being a Black agent or a Black creative within your role? Are there nuances? Are there things about being Black that affects the work that you do and how you do your work? Just wanted to know that. We'll go with Morgana first, please.
I think it's impossible not for it to affect your work, really. I think, oh gosh, it's a really hard one. Do you mean, like, does it affect my relationship with the company that I work with, or the people, or the industry as a whole? Sorry, just to be a bit more specific.
Does it come into play within the conversations that you're having, or maybe I should say more the decisions that you're making, whether it's for yourself or in conversation with other people about work that you want to produce or work that's being put forward?
Okay. Well, I think I specifically focus on diversity and inclusion, so that coupled with being Black is it kind of goes hand in hand. And I'm very aware that when I go into rooms, that is my, that's what my focus is. And the people that I go to meet, they usually know that's my focus. And I think it's really hard for me to deviate from that being my focus. But I think the industry is a lot more open to it now. People, when I first started at Sarah Part Associates, and I emailed all these heads of productions and producers and line producers to say that, I'm a new agent and I want to focus on diversity and inclusion, and that includes people of colour, women in technical departments, and disabled people working behind the camera. People couldn't wait to meet me. I was, inundated with meetings, and I still think that is the case, and people are very much open to make that relationship now. And I think for us at Sarah Part and myself, I think just my presence being there encourages a lot more emerging and established talent through the door, and feel that this is a place for them, and I get contacted a lot more. But I think also it encourages new talent and emerging talent to my door. So I feel like I have a lot of conversations with talent that I think probably they wouldn't have had with other agents, and that's not just in our company, but in other agents. I think we're opening up new conversations with talent moving forward, which is really exciting for me.
That's really great, and actually really interesting that there is those pockets of ownership around inclusion and diversity within the agencies, because that's not something that I personally knew existed. So that's really interesting from my standpoint.
It has to be across the board as well. We can't be the only people within the agency. At Sarah Part, we are always pushing forward for it to be across the board, that I'm not just the only person to contact when it comes to trying to broaden out your skills pool behind the camera. But I think that's something that's in the majority of companies, if you are focusing on diversity and inclusion, it's always going to be something that the company is continuously working on, trying to broaden that out across the whole team.
Thank you.
Do you want to add, Cynthia?
Yeah, just to really second that, I think the interesting thing about the world of agenting is it is decidedly archaic, and there is so much, surprisingly so much that is in place, considering the world and the type of talent and type of projects we work on. If you sort of look at the infrastructure of an agency, it's incredibly surprising in terms of the makeup of staff. I'm one of a few, Morgana and I are probably one of a handful, if that, I wouldn't even go as far as say a handful of Black female talent agents in the UK, which is nuts, because the UK is one of the biggest film and TV, industries in the world. So sort of, I guess my experience of being a Black agent is sort of constantly on a daily basis, sort of trying to challenge and reframe and sort of just kind of retrain sort of buyers and producers and potential people hiring talent, challenge their perception and their mind and their idea of what, you know, talent can do, what they're capable of, and what types of job they should be hiring them for, and equally sort of reflecting that in my list, so they then sort of take note. And agents are looking for Black writers and Black directors, and not just writers to write Top Boy, but writers to be sitting in the room on Peaky Blinders and other shows that sort of 10 years ago they wouldn't have had a sort of, you know, a look in. So my sort of, I guess, challenge is on a daily basis is just to reframe that context and open up sort of those opportunities, and reflecting that in my list as well.
David, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Well, yeah, I've been dealing. I can't recall ever dealing with a Black talent agent in this country, and I can't imagine there's many Black male talent agents around, even if there's starting to be Black female ones. It is that kind of industry. But then again, you know, the broader industry that it's feeding into of film and television, you know, I think is of all the professions I can think of, is probably the furthest behind. It always seems ironic to me whenever there's an expose on television, like a panorama or something, about racism in one of the institutions, be it the army or the post office or the police, and all these professions are years ahead of television itself. So I guess it's a familiar picture, but I mean, in terms of your basic question, I always think of the great Terry Macmillan, in one of her novels, wrote words to the effect of, you know, it's not like I wake up in the morning and think, oh God, I'm Black, when I get out of bed. Actually, I'm thinking about, you know, where have I got to go? What am I going to wear? How am I going to pay those bills? What am I going to eat? And yeah, to be honest, left to myself, I think I could probably go for days, if not weeks, without consciously thinking about being Black. But we live in an environment where you're unlikely to be able to get out the front door without being reminded. And I think, you know, nowhere more than in the workplace, in this industry. It's remarkable to me how people just have a persistent way of reminding you how aware they are of your colour or your minority, in the most unlikely and irrelevant settings. And that's part and parcel of the, well, I think it's fundamental to the issue.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to piggyback off that and ask, how important do you think it is for agents like Black agents to represent Black talent, whether it's above or below the line? Do you think that's important? Do you think that there's a difference that it makes in terms of the kind of work that's being put forward and the arguments that are being brought forward for whoever the creative is, or not? David?
Sorry, just say that again. It broke up a bit as you were saying.
How important do you think it is for Black talent to have representation from Black agents, essentially?
It's tricky. I think it depends on the circumstance. I think without doubt, I mean, you know, in terms of Black artists I've got to know well, I think often, you know, I have heard people complain about the issue of their, you know, maybe not being well understood by the people who represent them, and not being empathized with, and being unhappy about what they're being put forward for, and all manner of the ways they're dealt with. So I think, you know, I think the important thing would be to have that option. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you could, it could just be one of the many things you're taking into consideration along the way. But I think most people want to be represented by someone who gets what they are, you know, who gets what they're about. And too often there's not the option to go for that kind of representation for Black artists, full stop.
My sort of thoughts on it is, at the end of the day, it's just, I think artists just want to be represented by anyone and someone. I don't think it's necessarily a prerequisite or important that your talent is Black, so therefore your agent should be Black. But I do think the onus is on us very few Black agents in the industry to sort of take, just do that extra, and sort of just, particularly before the sort of the Blackout Tuesday on Instagram and all the sort of the new diversity pushes from companies, before it became popular for people to sort of be inclusive and diverse, the onus was on us to make sure that Black NFTS graduates are getting a look in alongside their counterparts. Black writers, Black directors, Black actors are also equally, you know, getting the opportunity to be signed by agents, and just sort of adding that extra care and paying that extra attention that quite possibly our white colleagues would not sort of think to be doing because of the unconscious bias and the things that already exist. So it's just taking that sort of on that extra mantle, I think, is really important. But I don't necessarily think it's important for the pairing to be the same, you know, of the same colour. I don't think that's necessarily a prerequisite.
I agree. I think it would be great if it would be great if talent felt that they were fairly represented by white agents, and I do think there are cases of that out there where that's happening. But I would hope that the people that I represent, especially the white people, sorry, not the white people, the Black people that I represent, do feel that there is an added extra by being represented by me. There's a level of conversation, there's a level of intimate conversation and deep conversation, and there's questions that they can raise with me that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable being raised with other agents. And they also know that I look at conversations and job proposals, I look at them differently maybe to other agents. And I don't mean just the agents that Sarah put, I mean agents on the whole. I will have a different lens when I look at it. But ideally, you know, and I think, like I think Cynthia said, and probably David said, I don't think talent out there says, you know, I want a Black agent. And I think they just want a good agent that's going to put them in front of the right people and get the job done. But, you know, I think it's definitely brilliant that there is people like myself and Cynthia and other Black and Asian agents out there. Kind of, it is on us to do that work, and it is on us to represent those people and give Black and Asian people that opportunity to have a platform, because you can easily see where some talent is kind of left aside because maybe they aren't understood, and maybe they aren't as, like, for example, as an agent, when I sign someone, I always say to them, you know, you get the best out of me when we communicate, when you email back, let's have a relationship, let's talk regularly. And I think there has to be a familiarity there to some degree, a kind of common ground, and that's how I work best. And maybe some talent wouldn't have that with a white agent.
Very much for that. So moving on to our next question. Wanted to know, what do you look for in talent to determine the success of a project? And is it the same across the board? The answer will be different, of course, because of the jobs that you do, but what do you look for to determine the success of the project you're casting for within the talent that is presented to you? And is that the same every time? Is there a formula, or does that change and vary? Over to Morgana.
Morgana? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, my internet is playing up, unfortunately.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone answered before me, but the first thing that I look for is It's more like when I meet you, is there a vibe? Are we going to work well together? Do I have that feeling that you and I would make a good team? Obviously, we look at CVs and I look at the work they've done. It all depends on which department they're in, whether they're a DIP, whether they're a first AD or a PM. I'll look at what their credits are and see if I have the skills and tools to build on that and create a career for them with what they've already established. But most importantly, it's all about, you know, a relationship with that person and whether we could work together as a team.
I sort of second that. Absolutely, it's important to, you know, representing a client is a little bit like, you know, embarking on a marriage. You're spending a lot of time with that person, and you sort of want to make sure that, you know, it's a partnership, and you can sort of, you know, just work together. And then I guess from my perspective, representing screenwriters and directors, the thing first and foremost I'm really looking for is someone with a really fresh take on whatever it is they're trying to make and to say and to write. You know, it has to be authentic and distinctive and sort of, you know, stand apart as well, because we are currently going through a period of time, and obviously it's a brilliant thing, but the market is so oversaturated with content, and you know, people making things and various platforms, and there's just coming, you know, it's everywhere. So it's people who are producing work that really just screams out and stands out. And I think, you know, once I spot that, I grab and sign and run with, and ideally make them incredibly rich. So that is that's the thing I look for. And you know, it doesn't have the amount of work the client has sort of produced upon us deciding to work together does not have, there's no sort of prescription. I've signed someone actually fairly recently off the back of them having literally only written a spec script of a very short piece, but just within those few words I could quite clearly see that they were brilliant, and as did Netflix. So it's, you know, and then conversely I've signed a director who's, you know, done an entire season of a show in their home country and sort of brought them over, so they're already established, and I brought them over and sort of, you know, introduced them to the UK market. So there's a real kind of, you know, range of what the person has done prior to it, but it's just about being distinctive and authentic.
And David.
Sorry,
Can you hear me, David?
Sure if you want me in on this one. I'd quite like to know when you're presented. People, hate their age.
Sorry, everyone, there's a bit of a digital lag. Sorry, could you go again, please, Ollie?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to know, when you're sort of presented with talent, say when you're in the room, when there's a casting, at whatever point you get involved with your talent, what it is that you're looking for within that talent that helps you determine this is what will be part of the success of this project.
Sorry, is that for me?
Yes.
I don't know if you could put your finger on sort of one single thing. I mean, hopefully, you know, you have to find it. I would say the hardest thing is you know, when someone has got their mind, and help them see the potential of something else. You know, there's a rigidity about most people's thinking, and certainly, you know, there's a lot of black talent I've got to know. There's been a relation with how they're bracketed and what they're being conceived. I mean, I know a friend in America ago who you know, he always used to swear to him was when he got picked up by the William Morris agency, because, you know, he was doing quite well, great writer, and suddenly when he was on the threshold of his work being translated into film and television projects, you know, being a relatively small fish in a big pond the size of that agency, kind of, for him, felt like he went straight to the bottom of the pile, you know, where they weren't really pushing him, and he'd have been better off representing himself, frankly. So it's a difficult world to negotiate. But I think when people are represented by somebody who really demonstrate that they know them and they understand them, it does make a really big difference, really huge difference in terms of how they're not just sold, but even just how your perception of what is possible is changed, if that makes sense.
We missed the first because of connectivity issues, but I think what you were trying to convey was that sometimes being represented by people that don't understand your experience can result in you being pushed down almost to a point where it's worth you representing yourself because you'd have like better results. And actually, when you're carry on, sorry.
It's something you frequently hear people complain about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I wanted to ask what your advice would be on timelines when contacting talent. What would be your advice in terms of how far in advance, if somebody's got a project and they're wanting to put together a cast, what would your advice be for somebody who wants to know how far in advance they ought to do that?
Who's that, sorry, aimed at?
Morgana,
David.
can you hear me?
Me? Oh, it's for me. Well,
Yes.
I don't really work with cast, but we usually, I would aim to contact a production maybe just after a line producer has been attached, or very soon after that, or they usually contact us once they have a line producer, or contact us for a line producer. There's many different routes as a team how we approach productions and productions approach us. I don't know if that helps, because I think you're talking about in the perspective of a director or producer approaching cast for their film. Is that correct?
I think there's a variety of kind of answers for that, and it really depends on the type of project, the stage of the project, what the producer or the writer or the creator is trying to achieve with it. So if it's a project that's unfinanced, on spec, but it's brilliant, and you want to get it to, I don't know, a lead actor to try and get their attachment in order to progress the project, then obviously, that's the only stage that you can approach. So you would approach at that stage. However, if it's a project that is sort of slightly further along, and you're sort of casting sort of more of the cast, and it's sort of more of a general thing, you're building it up in that sense, then yes, of course, I think you would wait until financing, line producer, some of the things are in place, and then do those proper approaches via, agents, and get availabilities and things like that. But I'm guessing from, the question was, it's probably the former, and it's sort of, how to reach out to actors in order to get to sort of move the project along. And I would just say, when the script's at the best possible, because all you have in that case is the script, and you've kind of got nothing else. So, you want your script to be brilliant, or whatever that means. But then that's the time that you approach, and you sort of try and find a way to get that script to the actor in question. That's just me guessing. I don't know, probably David, you might have another perspective on that as a producer.
Well, no, I'm not a drama producer. I mean, I've done drama documentaries, but I have to say, in those instances, usually the direct, I hate to say it, but you sort of knew who you wanted in production. So, I've done things that are sort of, recreations of historical events in the main, real life things, and you very quickly formulate an idea about who'd be good in what part. And most directors who've been around the block a few times tend to have a little sort of retinue of their sort of preferred actors. So my experience has been more about actually knowing who you want for roles and checking their availability or you know, trying to get them interested in doing it if they're busy, rather than that thing of like, you know, we're casting per se, and just, you know, looking to see who's the best person to fit the bill. So I hate to say it, but in my experience, it's been more kind of people already knowing what they want or who they want than genuine casting to any proper degree. Which sounds awful, doesn't it?
I think it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it's only the truth.
Somebody wanted to know about some of your casting/meeting horror stories and what people might do to sabotage a meeting with you. We will start with Cynthia, please.
Casting/meeting horror stories. Well, so I work on the lit side, so I've got very, very little to do with our wonderful casting and actors department. But in terms of meeting, I guess reframing that for sort of my experience in my world, would this be, so Ollie, just to clarify, is this question sort of a representation meeting or someone looking to sign with me and sort of a horror story from that, or what?
Both. I think one of the reasons I'm asking is I think quite often sometimes there's this separation between like this side and that side, like the performers and the people who are in the process of the cogs and the wheels making the work. And so yeah, I think it's just more to do with the dynamic of that relationship when you meet and when that's gone bad, and what happens when it goes bad frequently. Is it the same thing that keeps happening, or what are your stories?
So I don't have an answer for that. But what I will say, I guess, is one of the sort of the kind of common horror stories is sort of talent looking for representation and reaching out to your agents and sort of sending an email and sort of, you know, doing that whole thing where they're sort of like, you know, love your list and you've got great talent, you know, love your work you're doing, but they address it to someone completely different. Mm-hmm. So instead of to dear Cynthia, it would be dear Paul. So horror story, I guess, in that respect would be, yeah, just sort of make sure you know who you're addressing and sort of be as personable as possible. But that's all I have for you. I'm afraid I don't really have any casting horror stories.
Cynthia, Morgana, sorry.
Like Cynthia, I don't think there's an immense amount, because I meet people who want to be represented, and then I kind of meet a lot of producers and heads of production. And I'm trying to think of about like a really kind of terrible meeting that I've had with someone who wanted to be repped, and to be honest, they've all been pretty positive. To be honest, I think there has been a couple, maybe 2 occasions where I think I've met with people and they have been shocked that I'm Black, and it turns a bit sour or strange, or and then also with the same people who really what they want to be represented by is Sarah Putt herself and not me. And as much as we work as a team, you will be represented by me, and that's really about it. I don't have a kind of a crazy, well, not ones that I could tell you about, but and not from representation. Is it probably in terms of the industry meetings I've had, but other than that, that's it really. You know, if you're wondering, if you approach an agent how to come at it, it's like Cynthia said, know who you're talking to, and be able to convey your work and where you want to go to. And also what we try to kind of stop people from doing is coming to meet us because they want work and that they're just coming to get me work. I just need work. We don't work like that. We work as a team, we say as your co-pilot to kind of progress your career. We can only ever attempt to get you in the room, and then it's up to you to then make it work. So if anyone was coming to us and was like, I just want to work more, I want more work, I need to get work, we can't help you with that. What we can do is develop and curate your career moving forward. And if we can work together, then hopefully we can get you there and get you in those rooms and eventually get you those jobs. But that's never kind of like our first goal.
Awesome. I'm gonna throw some of the audience questions out now, and we'll go back to some of the other questions that we have a bit later. So I am a below the line artist, a DOP, and I was wondering if the speakers could expand on what an agent is looking for in a representee when the artist first makes contact with them.
Shall I go first with that one?
Yeah, sure.
The first thing I look at is their CV, and what maybe the last few jobs that they've done. And if it's quite a short career, then, you know, whether they come out of education or how they've, you know, how has this happened? How have they got into the industry? And the kind of redirect way, you know, at Sarah Putt is that, have you got 1 or 2 film and TV credits? I think if me and you, if I met you and we got on and I really felt like we could invest in you and that we worked well together and it was going to be a partnership, then I would need 1 or 2 credits to jump off. I couldn't, if you'd only done short form, I would struggle probably to get you your first credit. It would take a long time and a lot of work. So that's what I ask for immediately. And if you're a DOP, you know what, there is, you know, DOPs are a little bit different. If I look at your work and I'm like, kind of going back to what Cynthia said earlier, if I look at your work and it's amazing, you can tell you're extremely talented off of your kind of shorts and maybe commercials and music videos, then I'd probably be like, this is going to be a really hard graft for us. But if you want to come on board and we think we can work together, then as long as I've got the time and space to make that commitment, then I would.
Yeah, quite similar to Morgan actually. So obviously there are sort of 2 branches to my list. With regards to the directors, I would say my checklist is quite similar. I think the market at the moment is so competitive that, say 5 years ago, 7 years ago, signing a new director, I could happily sign someone with an exciting short film or music video. Now, probably quite sadly, the person will need to have directed a season of something somewhere in the world for me to be able to kind of confidently and successfully get them to the next step. That's in crude terms, because there are always exceptions to that, obviously. When it comes to writers on my list and signing writers, it's a little bit more abstract. It's a little bit more liberal. It can be, you know, a scrap of paper with a brilliant sentence, or it can be an amazing play. I have signed someone off the back of a 5-minute YouTube video, and today they've got an 8-part series that's currently airing on HBO and BBC Two called Industry. You know, there's no kind of, you know, there's no hard and fast rule when it comes to writers, except sheer talent and just being able to convey that, and me being able to convey that to buyers.
Do you have any opinions on this, David? Not an agent, but what are your experiences of the industry?
No, I was gonna. So I just remember the horror story,
Oh, I'd love to.
which was I've been working with a presenter for quite a long time, and she changed agents, and she suggested a meeting between. We were going to a channel actually, and she suggested that we meet up with her and the agent ahead of going in to see the person at the channel, and we arranged to meet in reception. I remember going there, there was a woman sitting in reception the whole time, but I'd been told that the presenter was coming along with the agent, so I didn't for a minute think this was the agent. But of course the presenter then turned up on her own, not able to work out why the agent hadn't introduced herself to me, because she told the agent that I'd be there waiting, and they'd be coming along to me. And it was a classic. It was so obvious because I was the only other person sitting in there that she'd not approached me because I was black, and it didn't occur to her that someone black could be the producer that they were there to meet. So that was awkward, and I had the presenter was so apologetic about it, and I had to say honestly, if that was if I didn't know that presenter already, it wouldn't have made the best first impression if we'd been meeting under other circumstances. But hey, that's how it goes.
Wow. I mean, I feel like I should be more shocked than I am, but wow.
Well, it's like, those things happen again and again, don't they, to all of us? And it's not it's weird. It doesn't surprise you, but it does kind of shock you even so when it happens. It's not unexpected, but it's still appalling.
Yeah, it is. So the next question I've got is to everyone. With the current growing trend of multifaceted filmmakers, i.e. actor, writer, directors, would it be advisable to seek representation from different specialized agents or agencies, or finding one agent that covers all of your skill set?
That's one for Cynthia.
Yeah, it's possible. There's a multitude of ways to do it, to be honest. I mean, Curtis Brown is a multi-service agency, and by that we do everything. So we've got my department, I've already mentioned, writers and directors. We have a huge actors department. We've got a presenters department. We've got a massive department for novelists, live events. The full works. So more often than not, we can cater for clients who sort of do lots of different things. But the thing about that is, it's not a given that when you meet with an agent for, say, if primarily you're a playwright and you're meeting with them, that agency for that, it's not a given that you will get representation for your presenting work or for for your novel writing. So it's just, you kind of you just got to sort of play it by ear a little bit. Ideally, yes, you want to sort of have everything in house, but I wouldn't pass up an opportunity, and you can basically mix and match a little bit and just sort of be mindful and just be kind of clever about it. And if you've got a big agency offering you representation for one thing, don't necessarily turn them down because they can't also represent you for acting, because the chances are you will be able to find that representation elsewhere. And it does happen very often, even on the sort of top end of the scale of sort of really experienced talent. You've got talent represented by independent for work, for writing, and another agent for acting, and another for voiceover, and it's all over the place, but it works, and people do successfully have a career with lots of different agents.
Cynthia, do you have many clients who have all the way around representation at Curtis Brown? Yeah, we do. And sometimes that comes later as well. And I think one of the great things about having a multi-service agency is, you may start off as a novelist, and then a few years later, you're like, hang on a second, that great novel I wrote, I really want to adapt it for TV. And it's literally a case of your book agent walking down the corridor and pairing you up with it can happen sort of later on as well. And but yeah, we do represent lots of talent, so it's not quite 360 as they do in some other agencies, but it's near enough. Interesting.
So another question from our audience is, where do reps tend to find their new talent or directors? Aside from the usual film festivals or film schools, I mean, like, I will comment that NTFS dominates the talent and production world in our industry. Is there any other common place where you find creative new talent or voices?
Who's that directed at?
It's not directed at anyone, so anyone from the panel can ask.
Shall I go first? I think when I was at the BFI doing it a bit kind of ad hoc, I used to use a group called Project Noir on Facebook. And then from there, I found other groups, other niche groups that were, and I think they have a lot of above the line writers, directors, producers. But then in those groups, you find camera people, you find production staff, the whole production department, you find people in props and production designers. And I started finding little groups like that. And then I also started partnering up with other people that were doing similar things to me in films, like in companies like Film London, the then head of production at Sky, who's now the head of production at Pulse Films, and also Addy at ITV. So you find people that are doing similar work to you, and you start sharing your knowledge on talent. But I think a more kind of like on the ground way is I would just go into IMDb and find films that had a diverse cast. If we want to be more specific, a black cast, and then I will literally go through all the credits and I will Google them, or I'll go to a HOD and I'll be like, hi, I know you've got representation, but I'd love to know about your team and who they are. And it isn't always a formal relationship. Sometimes it's just a tea or coffee to say, hey, I'm here, this is what I'm doing. And it might be in a couple of years that they might be at that point that they're looking for representation. We're also building out a diary service. We shouldn't call it a diary service, it's kind of a crew service. So I am now looking for more crew as opposed to just HODs. So again, it's kind of just grassroots research, Googling a lot of Google images as well, which I don't know if I should be saying that or not, but and asking people that I'm trying to represent more people of color, more women in tech roles, people with disability. Do you know anyone? Just send me their name, I'll reach out and make the first kind of connection.
Yeah, I mean, quite similar actually. I mean, I spend a lot of time, I mean, the obvious ones are film festivals, TV festivals, not just in London, but sort of regionally, smaller ones, university ones, that sort of thing. I read a lot from schemes and competitions. So like BAFTA do this brilliant Rowcliffe competition, and just kind of getting a sense of finding new talent in that space and in that way. And I just spend a lot of time online, like in a similar way to you, but I guess in many ways less visual. So just kind of, you know, someone with a quirky Instagram account and just finding out a bit more about them and just kind of using my powers of deduction a little bit and just kind of unearthing really exciting new talent from just kind of piecing together just really weird and interesting sort of signs of their potential talent and encouraging that.
BAFTA Crew is another great one as well. If you aren't part of BAFTA Crew and you qualify, you should definitely join that. But jumping off of what Cynthia said, Instagram is great. It's absolutely brilliant. There's so much below the line talent really putting themselves out there, really kind of curating their work through their Instagram feed. It's fantastic. I think it's such a brilliant tool for the industry as well as Twitter.
Do you have any thoughts, David?
I think it's not really my question's not really for me, but I mean similarly, I mean all production companies, you know, producers are looking for well, actually channels are always, you know, we want new talent, and you know, and it's this elusive thing, isn't it? You know, some people get spotted by chance because somebody's seen them do something in an unlikely place like a shop or something and just approach them. Other people come up through a more sort of conventional sort of route, but it's equally really hard to break new talent. You know, it's really holy grail. So usually there is, I mean, I've a couple of times gotten hold of people who've, you know, brand new, fresh talent, as it were, because in situations where you were looking at making something very specific. So, you know, most memorably for me, I remember doing a historical series of what would now be called a living history show, and we ended up casting a pair of archaeologists and a historian who were completely unknown. The historian hadn't written any books. She was a sort of reenactment historian, one of those people who dresses up at the weekend, but she was just brilliant and now is quite well known on TV. She didn't even, none of them even had agents actually when I first started working with them, and next thing you knew they were stars. I'll tell you the funniest thing though was they were wonderful to when we started working with them, it was like, oh, they haven't got agents. This is great. We just kind of talk to them directly. Like, that was great for one series. So as soon as that series was a hit and we were doing the second series, nightmare. Actually, one of them did get an agent. That was all fine. The two of them who didn't get agents, it was a total nightmare, because one of them in particular, his wife worked in PR, and just thought like, oh, you're a TV star now, you should be asking for proper money. And his idea of proper money was he wanted like 250 grand an episode or something ridiculous that you wouldn't even get in Hollywood. And in the end, we started suggesting that he find an agent, and thankfully he did, because it's a lot more fun dealing with a representative who at least knows the ballpark and knows the landscape than it is with somebody who's just making up numbers because they've got an idea that there's an endless amount of cash in the industry.
Which is not the case, especially in the UK.
Sadly not. Yeah.
So I've got two more questions from the audience. If anyone else has questions, please do drop them in the chat. We've still got half an hour left. So the first one is from someone that's still in their third year of university, and they say there's been a lot of pressure to try and sign with a well-known agency, but personally they feel like being signed with a massive agent would be rather overwhelming so early on in their career. I wonder if the speakers had any advice on big agencies versus boutique agencies, and which is better to approach when you're just starting out.
I suppose this question really kind of ties in to a few of the answers we've sort of each said along the way. I think that the general, as a rule, when you are applying for representation, you know who you're applying to, the individual that you're applying to, and you have a bit of a connection. And I guess a common misconception is a lot of talent tend to apply for representation with, Quentin Tarantino's agent. But the reality is Quentin's agent will probably be, finding jobs for Quentin Tarantino for most of the time, and probably not you starting out. I think the clever approach would be, which agency does Quentin Tarantino's agent work in, and who are the up and coming agents sort of around that? Because the biggest asset of an agency is information, and any employee at an agency has access to the same information and the same tools. The choice that you have to sort of make is between an agent that is, really established and doing brilliantly and is brilliant, or an agent that is equally and potentially as brilliant, but is sort of building up, and therefore you kind of have a shared journey, a common ground, and just more of a chance of sort of jointly, sort of achieving success. And I think that's probably the logical approach to looking for an agent if you're just starting out.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say there's been times when, so I don't know if I cut out before when I was talking about my friend in the States who said the biggest mistake he ever made was getting signed by William Morris, because he was such a small fish in their great big pond that it was hard for him to even talk to his agent, because his agent was too busy pushing
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, exactly. Really sounded, and worse than that, when he ended up, basically going out and doing his own deals and finding his own work, he then had huge problems with the agent being pissed off that as he sort of gone behind his back and slightly embarrassed him by getting work that the agent hadn't found for him, and then sort of being priced out of the market by the agent who wanted to sort of throw his weight around when he did get involved. I mean, it can be a nightmare, and I've certainly had experiences where I kid you not, I've been trying to book people, and occasionally you get this curious situation where the agent doesn't seem to know that they've got that client. It's like I've literally had that happen. It can be strange. So I personally, I would think if you're starting out, go with someone who's got the who can actually afford the time to get to know you individually and represent you individually, rather than going for you don't need Quentin Tarantino's agent if you're not Quentin Tarantino, do you? You don't need Stephen Fry's agent if you're just starting out. It's because Stephen Fry's agent or Quentin Tarantino's agent's job is fending off the phone calls. You want someone who's actually proactively beating down doors for you, which is a slightly different thing.
Just jumping off of what David said, I think out of all of the agents, I probably look after the most amount of emerging talent. And I think my job day to day is slightly different to theirs. I think I do a lot of having to kind of scramble around and find work for a lot of my clients. Whereas I think when your client is more established, it comes in and you're kind of giving them the choice of, you've got all of these options. This is what I think is the best option for you. Whereas I'm kind of like, we need to think strategically that if you did this continuing drama, it will then get you to this, and people will see that you'll be able to handle, like a running schedule. And you think very differently. And obviously I'm pro boutique because I'm at Sarah Pike Associates and we are a boutique agency. But kind of just echoing what both David and Cynthia said, I do think it is about the relationship with that person. And when you meet that agent, you will know if they have the time and the space and they have the investment in you to really fight for you moving forward. It is all about that relationship and whether they can afford that to you. But I also think that's why, I have 3 emerging DOPs at the moment, and DOPs take a lot of work to get them out there and get them going. And so I wouldn't ever sign more. I don't think I'd sign as many DOPs as I have now, because they need your investment, they need your time. There's a lot more, I think, than any other department. For me, being below the line, looking at their work, they're doing continuous amounts of work, which is kind of progressing them. It's also progressing their creativity as well. And also they have to establish a lot of relationships with a lot of emerging directors, which are going up. You need to cultivate those relationships and really keep in touch so that when they go, the DOP hopefully goes with them. So I think it's about an agent who has time for you and has time for your career and what you need moving forward.
That's interesting. It's interesting that there's like the clear distance between like a boutique agency and a non-boutique agency. And I think the next question, probably an answer from Cynthia and an answer from Morgana will be necessary, because I think it depends. But the next question is haggling or negotiating with agents expected, or is it bad manners or practice and can ruin a relationship if you want to book their client?
With haggling, sorry, negotiating with whom?
With the agent on the client's like fee for the production.
So a director.
Oh God, yeah, sorry, you go.
Yeah, don't pretend you don't know what that means. See, agents never want to negotiate.
No, I'm sorry, I was unclear. I thought you meant negotiating with potential client.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah. Yeah.
But you mean with the producer or line producer or whoever who's hired them? Right, okay.
Yeah.
Go on, Cynthia, you go.
100%. It's like every day you've got to. Each job you do for a client, you seek to improve their last fee, their quote, their rate. Otherwise, there's no point. And similarly, you create that, within obviously the confines of budget and what's happening in the wider industry. You create that value and you create that rate. And you take into account things like, who's making it and where the money's coming from, etc. But absolutely negotiating, what's the point of us if we're not negotiating on behalf of our client? And also the job of the agent is to have those awkward conversations with the producer so the client can focus on being brilliant and creative and not have to, have those conversations. But yeah, 100%, we negotiate, we haggle every day, all day.
That's the thing. I hate talking about money for myself, but if I'm talking for a client, I'm like, we're going to get that cash.
Yeah.
And it is because, the biggest currency we have as an agent is our knowledge of the industry. And we might have someone, I always say this to new clients, is that we might have someone on something similar or on that production. So we know what the budget is, but also we establish relationships with producers because they will come back to us and we will come back to them. So it's important for us to to you know, look after those relationships with those producers as well. But they need to know that if you're going to hire one of our clients, that we want the best for them. We don't want anyone being undercut, and we're going to ask all of the questions. And I sometimes wish that, you know, throughout my career I had an agent. Obviously I wouldn't have needed an agent, but they put you away, they keep you away from those weird conversations, which then can lead to weird relationships moving forward. We do it for you. You kind of push us out there and blame us for everything, and you know, we make it work and we get on with it. Then that's our job, definitely.
Yeah.
That must be an incredible relief as well, because like obviously the agent being the middleman between like two talented individuals means that there isn't that weird dynamic on set that could happen.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, the beauty of us is director or talent can be on set and do the directing and be vibing with cast, but they could literally run to the green room or whatever and call me and be like, I'm pissed off about this, sort it out. I then call and no one's any the wiser, you know. It's like we have those awkward conversations.
Yeah, we're not quite that gullible on the
yeah, but it's all about confirming and not confirming. So if you're not having the conversation with the talent,
then you tend to have a fair inkling where it's coming from, even if the talent is smiling benignly at you as though. But it's funny, I would often wonder how brilliant I could have been if I just had someone to negotiate money for me and not had to get into that myself. Why don't producers have agents? That's what I want to know. But
we represent some producers.
I represent producers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk later. Obviously I can't tell you how badly I need it, but no, I've always envied people, you know, having agents to do that on behalf of them. But it's funny because there have been times though, and we're going back to that thing of people not feeling that they're properly represented or that their agent really gets them. I mean, I have had times where I've got to know people, and they've been like, you know, after an awkward conversation with the agent, I've been able to say, it's getting a bit sticky, and they'll go, let me talk to the agent and just sort of iron that out, because they don't seem to realize how much I want to do this. And I remember once I had quite a big name black talent who really, you know, I never met him before. The agent set up a meeting. We met as soon as I not only told him about the project, but we just really kind of clicked. And it turned out afterwards he'd never had a black producer before, or a black director in anything he'd done. So I think just the sheer novelty, even though he was a very well-known drama talent, the sheer novelty of working with someone black behind the camera, albeit in a factual series, was really appealing to him, and he really wanted to do it. And I just got a wall from his agent and about availability, money, the whole thing. And I ended up thinking, I've only met this guy once, but he's given me his mobile. I'm just going to call him up and level with him, you know. And I was on my way home. I stopped in the car park at Sainsbury's and just sort of summoned up the courage to go, like, I really want to make this happen, but like, your agent's telling me he's going to walk away and we can't go any further. And he said, you know, let me talk to the agent. You know, I've told him how much I want to do it, and he was pissed off with the agent because he's like, you know, the agent's not. And if I tell you honestly, the only thing he wouldn't move to do our little show was a shoot he was doing for a Spike Lee film. You know, everything else he was prepared to move out of the way to accommodate us. And money, you know, he was like, I'll do it for whatever you're offering, which was, you know, very much contrary to what the agent was saying. So, you know, again, it's just a real reminder of how be careful who you're represented by, I guess.
I will say, in defense of agents, that even though we have we're robust and, you know, we negotiate, we're not complete laws unto ourselves. And any good agent communicates with their client. So everything we're doing, we're fighting for, the client is, if you're doing your job correctly, fully aware of it and is in agreement with it. And at the point when they're like, look, you know what, I really love this project, let's just take this one on the chin, obviously we will concede, but there's never a case, if you're an agent worth your, you know, merit, that you would sort of blindly be fighting to a point where you put the job in jeopardy just for the sake of winning a point or winning an argument. So I will say
that's because of who you are and what you do, Cynthia. What we were talking earlier. I mean, this really was, you know, this is a household name, Black British talent, who, as I got to know him better, you know, was very unhappy about how he'd been represented over the years. Of course, he'd never had, he'd not only never had the option of someone Black representing him back then, but, and I'm going back about 10 years or so, but he also just had been, you know, kind of had an unhappy relationship, I think, with his agent, because he had different ideas about where he wanted to go and what he wanted to do, whereas his agent had him very much sort of packaged in a, you know, this is what you do, that's what I'm going to keep on selling you as, the same as what you've done before, instead of acknowledging his desire to do a lot more than that, and a lot different from that.
There's a lot of mismatching when it comes to being an agent, and sometimes, and I'm sure Cynthia will know, we have to be people. We have to be people. You have to really know how to manage that person and to work with, and that's why I keep saying that so much, because even me, I'm very indecisive, and I change my mind from left to right with my, you know, my personal life. You know, is this wall going to be green? Is it going to be? And I think, especially once you've got really established talent, they've got a lot on the table, they're getting asked to do a lot of things, but you've already spoken to them and you know where they're trying to get to, and you can kind of have the overall, the big picture look, because you can see the work that's coming in, the work's not happening, you can see the industry. And so that's part of being an agent, that you are guiding them towards their goals. So sometimes it can seem, especially from the outside, like you're sabotaging them or you're not putting them in for the right thing. And they might be in front of the producer going, oh, I'd love to do this. But then when you bring them back and we're like, this is what's on the table, this is the options we've got, we have to weigh everything up. But again, I'm okay to look like the bad guy if my client is getting what they want, and, you know, I don't mind being out front and, you know, taking the brunt of it. But it is a constant juggling. Like sometimes I'll have a client that will say, that's it, I don't want to do that kind of TV again. But something will come up, that TV will come up again, and I will go, are you sure? And then I'll be like, oh, you know what, I haven't worked this year because of the pandemic, I'll do it now. So, you know, it is, as Cynthia said, it's constant communication about what they want, because it will change day to day, week to week, month to month.
Yeah, and please don't think I'm feeling bad now.
No, don't. Some people have bad relationships.
No, look, my story from before about what it was, if anyone who's had experience of dealing with somebody who's not got an agent or isn't represented will you know, is the best person to be able to tell you about the benefit of agents, as I was saying earlier. And there's no comparison between dealing with somebody who's got I've had people who've got their husband or their wife representing them. That's pretty nightmarish. You know, professional agents broker all kinds of things that would never get brokered otherwise, in all kinds of ways. And we're all, you know, even though we're all, the routine is that, you know, you have a lovely conversation with the talent, and then, because I've met some agents who just, you know, whose strategy is just to shout at you and be a bit intimidating. I think that's the kind of old school thing, you know. If you've got a big name talent, you just shout, so that's what I'm demanding, and that's the end of it, goodbye, you know. And but overall, agents are worth their weight in gold. All kinds of things wouldn't happen if you didn't have agents. And the thing I had to say, I have never ceased to be amazed at the top name talent, you know, from movies, Hollywood, who I've been able to get to do cheap little low budget documentaries, you know, as narrators or contributors for embarrassingly little money, you know. it's just you know, I mean, I was working with on a series where we were doing a documentary about Muhammad Ali, and we got Lawrence Fishburne to do the narration for £800 sterling. You know, I mean, I imagine Lawrence Fishburne drops around that kind of money for the guy who parks his car as a tip. You know, it's like I can't imagine why he was doing it, but well, you know, Don Cheadle did a whole series for a similar amount of money about black comedians, because you know, one of the people we were doing in the series was I think it was Richard Pryor was his absolute hero, and it was like, yeah, you know, that we could even get a reply from agents of people like that for such paltry, low budget little things. Just shows the magic of what is possible and what can work, you know.
And I would add to that as well, because actually a lot of the conversation we've been having is sort of agents in their reactionary role, but there are sort of other hats to agents, and you know, as well as turning down offers or bettering offers, we also, part of our job and our role is to create opportunity. And an example of that is, a sort of a prime example of that is at Curtis Brown, we've actually set up our own in-house production company for that very reason. So instead of sitting down and, you know, trying to send out scripts to, I don't know, whatever studios to try and beg them to make whatever project, we kind of sit down and go, okay, what are the tools and, you know, that we have in-house? What do we have? So we've got a brilliant books department. Let's find a book to adapt. We've got brilliant talent, actors. So let's attach some of our leading bankable actors to this project. Let's find a writer that we represent. So we're piecing together all of the elements, collaborating with all the different departments, collaborating with all the people we represent, and then using our in-house production arm, we're able to actually get the project financed, developed, and produced and made, and people watch it. So that is very much kind of us, instead of sitting there twiddling our thumbs and waiting for the call, waiting for the email, it's us going to our client, what do you want to achieve and how can we do it with all the tools in our arsenal, and actually achieving. So there is that side of, you know, the benefit of having an agent can be equally, yes, get the great deals for you, get the money, but also to create opportunities out of what seems like nothing.
We've got 2 more questions before we wrap up for the day. So the first one is for Cynthia and Morgana. Have you ever poached a client?
No.
No.
That was easy. And our last question is, what's next for your career? What are you looking forward to in the future? Are there any projects that you're working on that you're particularly excited about? Cynthia, you spoke about how you have production in-house. Is there anything that you're developing that you can speak about? Give me the
next, just okay. We've just got some clients doing some really exciting. So I represent quite a few emerging writers, and we're kind of at that stage now where we're sort of seeing the fruits of their labour on screen. So one of the most recent ones is a show called Industry, which is out at the moment. It's just been confirmed to return for a second season, and that's a series for BBC Two and HBO, which is very exciting. Another one of my brilliant filmmakers, Shola Amu, he's had a brilliant year. Obviously he had a film called The Last Tree, and sort of over the last 6 months or so, we signed some really exciting projects for his next step. So it was just announced yesterday that he's going to be directing a feature for Searchlight on Muhammad Ali, and sort of that's focusing on that time when he avoided the military. He's also doing an exciting project for HBO and another for Apple. And we've just had another show green lit for Amazon. So there's some really exciting projects kind of on the very, very near horizon. But mostly I'm just looking forward to being able to go to a cinema again or go to a film festival and actually see people.
Right. I run a festival and we had to cancel last year. And so I've literally been waiting for things to fix themselves so I can throw this queer film festival that prioritizes queer people of color. Really excited about Industry coming back for a second season.
Yes.
I have that series. How annoying it. What about you, Morgana?
So for 2021, I really just really looking forward to seeing people in the flesh, fingers crossed. But the main thing I'm going to be focusing on is developing our crew service. So as an agency, we all represent HODs below the line. Sarah will look after producers and some directors as well. But what I'm trying to look at now is crew, and how this massive skills shortage that's coming up below the line in the next 3 to 4, I think it's like 50,000 jobs there will be in production over the next 3 to 5 years. So what I'm looking at is how we can facilitate that, and especially how we can increase diversity and inclusion behind the line in those jobs. So at Sarah Park, what we're looking at is the diary service and how we can facilitate and bring in-house more emerging talent, more people working in crew who want to get to HOD at some point. It's kind of really fixing a talent pipeline. So we've got a trainee program and a foundation program that's run by the amazing Nicola Lees. Check that out if anyone here is kind of at the start of their career or kind of figuring out what they want to do. And so the crew service will sit after that and before the agency. And so it will support everyone from first assistant right up to second assistant going on to being HODs. So it's really looking at how we can facilitate that kind of support for that talent, but also how we can reach out to talent that's working short form, like commercials and music videos and short films, who want to come over and do film and TV, how we can take their skills and it be transferable. And I'd hate saying that because it shouldn't be transferable. If you are working behind the camera in short form, it should translate into long form. But it's really looking at how we can bridge that gap and bring that talent over that's kind of working over there but is desperate to do more film and TV. So that's something that's rolling, and we're thinking about it, and hopefully we're going to launch something in maybe March, late spring, a new kind of service, a new kind of join up service within Sarah Park, which isn't quite the agency and isn't trainees, but it's bridging that gap.
That sounds incredible. And if you could drop a link in the chat on where we can engage with that, where our participants can engage with that a little bit further, and also feel free to drop your socials in the chat as well, so people can start adding you. David, you're what new projects have you got going?
Oh, I want to say ask my agent, but of course I haven't got one. Bitterly, but I'm working on another documentary feature film project. It's a co-production with the BBC coming up, and which has been, like all productions at this time, just bedeviled by COVID restrictions and everything. But we've actually come through it, and we're in the cutting room now, so that's really exciting because we're at the business end. And I'm about to start something new with one of my favourite people who I've worked with over the years, actually, Bethany Hughes, Professor Bethany Hughes, the historian, who I knew for the longest time without working with her, but in the last 5 years we've worked together quite a lot. And I have to say, in a world where, you know, I love making programs about Black people and Black subjects, but it does, you know, it does get a bit boring that I only seem to get phoned up about things that are Black, because actually in my career I've tried to, you know, thoroughly diversify, and actually most of the things I'm best known for aren't Black subjects per se at all. But Bethany's great because she comes at me with things that not only aren't Black, they're completely outside of my experience. The last thing was a series about the Greek Odyssey and finding out the truth behind the myths and legends. And I did not have a classical education. I didn't go to that kind of school, and you know, I was literally having to go to my son, who does get taught all this kind of thing at school, to tell me who the hell Homer and Odysseus were, so I could get on top of it. But it's just so refreshing to be constantly working with somebody who's never ever given me any apparent indication that she's ever noticed I'm Black. It's great, so I'm looking forward to that, and like everybody else, just hoping and praying that 2021 will see an end to this awful pandemic and all this awful uncertainty and lockdowning.
I think we're all hoping that next year is going to be a more fruitful year, just for social lives, for careers, and for a new, really exciting activity in terms of film and TV. Yeah, so that's all we've got time for today. So I'm going to wrap up. Can we give our guests a huge round of applause, whether they can hear us or not? Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you, David. You've been awesome. This session's been so insightful. It's nice to kind of like have the space to engage with agents and producers at the level that have all that experience, because there's not a lot of opportunities for us to do this, especially producers and oh, sorry, someone's in the waiting room. Producers and agents who are from the community. That's especially special. So thank you so much for joining us today. To everyone else, this is the last session of the week. A recording of this session will be sent to you, so you can review it, you can link back in with it, you can gauge what you need from it. And yeah, we'll release details about the full program from S.O.U.L Fest, the full Pro-Create program next year. So if you want to link in with us on our socials, they should be in the chat somewhere, I think. If not, it's just S.O.U.L Fest. So if you search S.O.U.L Fest, you'll be able to find us. Thank you for today. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you soon, hopefully. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. It's nice to meet everyone.